COVID is going to stay for years. It is going to live as we are living. It may change its character. So from government point of view, we have to have continuous surveillance. In whole over world, it has to be surveilled for till it lasts. It is going to last till human being is going to be. As we are invading into jungles, invading into forest, new and new viruses are going to come, new and new infections are going to come.
Youngsters in the late 20s, early 30s, late 30s and so on who have had cardiovascular events. It is something that can be attributed to both. One is that for 2 or 3 years, people were even scared to go out to the park for a brisk walk. And then obviously long COVID, especially the Delta wave. I have also been reading multiple studies that favor the long-term effects of COVID on heart health.
Now there's a trend. I am going full body checkup. Labs have got their, some lab parameters.
Yeah.
So full body checkup, even God cannot check your whole body. These type of full body checkup gives you pseudo confidence कि मैं तो टेस्ट करवा के लाया हूँ, कल ही मैंने टेस्ट करवाए हैं, सारे normal हैं.
One thing that the nation needs to understand is that we are not superhumans. And it is not possible that you called us at 10:45 and if we didn't pick up, then it doesn't mean we don't care about you. It just means we might be sleeping.
Namaste, Jai Hind. Welcome to another edition of ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Is the COVID pandemic over? Are the COVID vaccines and the boosters that we have taken, are they going to keep us safe enough if we hit another wave? What about children? Do they need boosters? Are the flu shots which they have to take this winter, is that going to keep them safe from COVID, if at all there is another wave? What about random tests that doctors seem to be prescribing these days? Are doctors losing their skill sets just because they have everything is based on lab-based medical analysis, and the therapy is also based on these kind of tests which are done in laboratories? To answer these questions, I spoke with Dr. Arjun Dang, who runs one of the busiest diagnostic laboratories in New Delhi. In the podcast is also Dr. Dhiren Gupta, Paediatrician, Senior Consultant at the Sir Ganga Ram Hospital, also in New Delhi. Thank you very much for speaking with us, Doctor. Dr. Gupta, explain to me at what stage are we in the pandemic, in the fight against pandemic? Because there is talk that, we might be heading for a fourth wave. But then there are some who say that the pandemic is over. So there's a little confusion. So could you tell me where we are right now?
Yeah, I'll be explaining in the two ways.
Ji.
One as a professional and second is for any human being. I'm also a human being at my house, normal human being, right? Normal public. This COVID is going to stay for years like influenza. It is going to change the character. It may come in another form. What presently we are dealing with, many patients might be suffering from COVID, but that COVID is not life-threatening. That is like a mild influenza. In very few of patients, it is life-threatening. It is affecting their life. So that's why people are forgetting it. Now, as a professional body, if 1 out of 10 patients, still they are suffering from COVID, right? But we are not very much concerned. Like a patient, it comes with influenza or with any virus like RSV virus, they are in simple wards. They are suffering from some respiratory infection, some small pneumonia or some asthma has got exaggerated because of that virus. We just give symptomatic treatment. No specific treatment is needed. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about COVID, pandemic probably is likely to go in a, say, month or 2 months time. So pandemic means in the whole world it is spreading. So that status likely to go, but it is going to stay and it is going to live as we are living. It may change its character. Unless a new virus comes with sudden change in character, with like we say antigenic shift, major antigenic shift like which happened in influenza H1N1 came. It came with new virus, absolutely new and virulent virus which can affect some body part. We are not worried. We are not majorly concerned. So from government point of view, we have to have continuous surveillance. In whole over world, it has to be surveilled for till it lasts. It is going to last till human being is going to be there.
Oh, really?
Yes. Like influenza, normally RNA virus or DNA virus, and you have seen the smallpox also came in different way like a monkeypox. So as we are invading into jungles, invading into forest, new and new viruses are going to come, new and new infections are going to come. So we don't know. Actually, human doesn't know. If you talk about COVID, nobody knew about second wave. When the second wave, in the after first wave, everybody declared, oh, now we are COVID free. We are clapping. We are, throwing showers of flowers and all that. And suddenly second wave came. Now, following that, everybody you must have seen and A to Z person is speculating. Now another wave will come, another wave will come. And it has to be true in some way. So they will say, okay, we were true because we speculated this way. So probably the virus and nature is much more different, much more faster in evolution than human being.
So, Doc, you were talking about, that that COVID is never really going to go away.
Yeah.
But you're a pediatrician, so obviously my question to you will be that what about children? Because when the Delta wave came, at that time, when the casualty figures came out, and then there was also this talk that children are not going to get as affected as adults. But when Omicron came in 2022, then we saw, and then schools reopened. So then the number of children affected were there. Now, have they got the vaccines? Have all children across the country got vaccines? And what about boosters? Do children need boosters?
Yeah. Now, first question is regarding the Omicron, how it affected the pediatric age group. When we talk about first wave form, it didn't affect it directly as a viral pneumonia. But what happened after, say, 4 to 6 weeks, some inflammatory syndrome in form of MIS appeared during first and second wave. Now came the Omicron, right? Till Omicron came, pediatric age group was not vaccinated. Unfortunately, what happened during Omicron or just before Omicron, when we started vaccinated pediatric age group, our vaccine was not Omicron preventive vaccine. So it was actually waste to vaccinate the pediatric age group because Omicron was not preventable by those vaccines. And the pediatric age group, especially infants, got direct infection in form of upper respiratory tract infection or severe sort of, you can say, upper airway obstructive lesions this pediatric patient presented with, right? So there was a difference between the first and second wave. That was in form of MISC, that is multisystem inflammatory syndrome, pediatric age group presented. And following that in Omicron, because of upper respiratory tract infection, we have seen many infants landing in hospitalization. But there was no MISC after Omicron. So it is a little bit complicated. If I simplify the things, that pediatric pneumonias were always never been major problem in whether it was Omicron or first second pneumonia. It was post-infectious inflammatory syndrome during first two waves and direct upper respiratory tract infection in third wave, that is Omicron. And unfortunately, none of the vaccine, even the present context, none of the vaccine is preventive for Omicron. That's why over the time you must have seen that.
Only the children?
No, I'm talking about in general.
Oh.
So we don't know what is the vaccine status. Should we get new vaccine? Even if the new vaccine which is going to benefit Omicron, should we get it done? Because Omicron is a milder one.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Dang. Everybody needed you in the city, in Delhi during the wave, Delta wave especially. Tell me, what has been your learning curve during, the Alpha wave, the Delta wave, and now post that?
Absolutely. Firstly, it's a great privilege being here. Thank you for having me. And I think the entire paradigm of diagnostics, and especially the learnings that we've had, have been paramount throughout the pandemic. And I still remember that this was just before the Delta wave. And just like a small example, our call volumes of patients calling into our customer care for collections or requests increased 5-fold. And this was a time when the entire healthcare industry was actually facing the problem of their staff also falling unwell, with half the city already infected. So I think the one lesson that we got is that you can be dependent on processes but not people. And that is where actually automation and technology really actually made its way through the front door. And I think that was for the positive as well, because this was the time when at least the IVD industry or the diagnostics industry and all of healthcare in India also embraced that technology to increase throughput and also serve the masses throughout the pandemic. But apart from this, also there have been immense learnings, and not only on how to overnight scale up, and especially during that Delta wave, how to use innovative ways to collect more samples, report more samples, but also have that process dependency and not be dependent on your people, because at that time our staff was themselves, a lot of them were getting infected.
Doctor, you had these mobile testing centers.
That's right.
That, those drive-in ones. They must have shut down after, right? Now, my one question was that you invested so much in putting those up, getting permits, because it wasn't easy,
Absolutely.
to get those permits, to set up those. You had those. Couldn't those have continued? I'm going to move away from COVID because
Sure.
I've already spoken
Absolutely.
about COVID. Couldn't those have continued, and you could have done like the other things, the lifestyle disease checks, which, people don't do it, right? Nobody goes to check whether they have diabetes or not, whether they have high blood pressure or जब तक कुछ होता नहीं है.
Exactly.
जब तक कोई collapse नहीं कर जाता, these basic things are not checked. And one is reading more and more that India is the diabetes capital of the world and things. So these drive-through places should have continued, right?
Yes. So we had 4 initially, out of which 2 are still functional. And like you said, both of these are currently being used for routine wellness testing. And what has actually happened over these months or years is that the patient's mindset or the consumer's mindset has become that they don't want to enter a big healthcare institution or a hospital or a lab to get their sample done. So a lot of people actually prefer just driving by in their car and getting their samples done from the car only. So till date, we still have 2 of these open in South Delhi only and 1 in West Delhi, and where a lot of people make bookings and come in. And at the end of the day, for us, it's the patient satisfaction and that feeling of safety that they get. And being inside a car obviously reduces that exposure and maximizes safety for the patient just to be sitting in their own comfort, in their safe zone in the car and do all their tests. And like talking about these non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, etc. as well. Now, what we have seen is that throughout the pandemic, all of these have been on the back burner for a lot of people. And obviously with that apprehension of not being able to or wanting to step out to a hospital or a healthcare space, they've just ignored it. Even if you look at the incidence of cancers, even the incidence of blood pressure, autoimmune diseases, diabetes, hormonal diseases, all these are really flaring up now because people have obviously ignored them past the 24, 36 months of the pandemic.
Yeah. डॉक्टर साहब, आपके पास तो ये सुविधा आप कर ही नहीं सकते हैं कि आप थोड़े पेशेंट्स देख लें. आपके किस्म के हॉस्पिटल में तो थाउजेंड्स ऑफ पीपल कम पर वीक. आई एम श्योर यू कैन नॉट टेल योर पेशेंट्स कि आप कम कीजिए, आप कम आना, like your hospital also, right? You have so many patients that you see. This is a problem that everybody is facing. They don't want to go to the hospital after this fear of, जब कोविड के बाद लोग हॉस्पिटल नहीं जाना चाहते. तो अगर जो कुछ हो सकता है फ़ोन पे पूछ लें कि हॉस्पिटल ना जाए. डू यू सी दैट? बट विद एज अ पीडियाट्रिशियन, जब तक आप फिजिकली बच्चे को देखेंगे नहीं, आप फ़ोन पे तो आप कर नहीं सकते हैं. सो व्हाट इज़ द सॉल्यूशन देन? हाउ डू वी डील विद दिस इशू ऑफ क्राउडिंग इन हॉस्पिटल्स?
First issue, as a doctor, if you ask me, this phone calling and taking advice, I hate this one. Though I did lot phone calling during COVID time, that was different. We were dealing with just one disease. एक ही disease थी, standard parameter था, standard problem थी. We know what is happening in this patient, right? I did lot of adult COVID, right? In thousands, not in hundreds. Per day, I remember for 3 days I couldn't take bath just because of COVID, adult COVID calls, right?
Even though you're a pediatrician.
Yeah, I'm a pediatrician.
But आप physician
yes.
हैं, आपको करना.
Yeah, in fact, I trained myself in adult COVIDology. I started taking round in adult COVID ward. I used to be alone and nobody knew the treatment, right? When we treated. So I got myself attached to the COVID from the beginning. So disease evolved in front of me. So with the help of lot of my friends who do who were adult physician, so I trained myself, right? One thing is that. Second, now we come to this electronic calling or online calls and all that. As a patient, you are going to be at major loss if you don't show yourself physically and just take a call, just take an suggestion from a doctor, right? Advice from a doctor, not showing them physically.
And Googling, doctor, is that
No,
also?
that you know the answer, right?
No, I need to know how it is going
what
to
happens.
affect.
What
Sir.
happens? First, I'll talk about this online calls. 90% of the things do settle when you talk to the doctor or patient sitting in front of you. You look at the eyes and patient examination, you touch the patient. Over the time, people look at the MRI, CT scan, X-ray, and they don't touch the patient, they don't talk to the patient, and that's why patient also feel dissatisfied. So I always feel that this should not be done. So if patient is in front of you, you talk to them socially, you talk to them medically, you take them proper history, you write your notes, and then you move ahead, right? Then you can take another phone call that, okay, what has happened, how are you? And unless I don't see them once physically, it's very dangerous for the patient to just have call and get the treatment, get the investigation. Lab should come after they have consulted a doctor physically, not just online. That COVID time is gone now.
Yeah.
Now the second question, what you were asking, last one.
The Googling that people do.
Googling. The problem with the Google is like I diagnose a disease. It's a temporary or it's not a. I'm not sure. It is just a speculation of a doctor that you are suffering some disease, and you start Googling. In Google, what they will catch, 10% of the complicated disease process, they will come as a first. So you will be dead scared going through that. And 90% disease is going to be mild, right? So you are opening a dead Pandora box, a scary Pandora box for you as a normal human being, as a population. And then you become panicky. And then you again start, window shopping for a doctors. So you are going to spend unnecessary money. You are going to produce anxiety without any actual disease which has got some complications. So you are suffering from a milder disease. Because of Google, you have made it complicated.
Right.
So definitely you should avoid. I am not talking about as a doctor. Myself, I've seen a doctor prescribing some medication. I Googled the medication and I found a dreaded side effect in the front. And I did not took it. Then I went to the doctor. I told him, यार मेरे को ऐसी मेडिसिन लिखना, इसका ब्रांड नेम चेंज कर देना, अब मैं नहीं गूगल करूँगा. And I am consuming that same medication for past 3 years. Okay. So when it can impact a doctor, जब मेरे को affect कर सकती है, can you imagine एक normal human, normal population को कितना affect करेगी?
Dr. Dang, I'm going to ask somewhat similar question, an offshoot of what he has said. You know, this the connection between diagnosis and therapy, and that doctors spending lesser and lesser time, and maybe this is what patients say, let me tell you. I mean, you may not agree with it, but patients say that doctors spend lesser time with them. I can understand when it is a rural setup, when a doctor has, literally dozens of patients to see in a day. The pressures are too much. But then patients say that वो system ही खत्म हो गया है, where doctors spent time with us, touched, as Dr. Gupta was saying, touched the patient. He needs to do that because he's a pediatrician. But the lesser and lesser time that doctors spend, and more dependence on labs and for tests. Right?
Absolutely.
That whole connection where the therapy is based on your tests which are done and lesser on
clinical examination.
Do
Absolutely.
you see that in your...
Absolutely. So a very interesting question. And I would say that there are both sides to the coin in this. And me being from a family of doctors, I saw my grandfather, who was an MD physician, and he was the doctor during the partition days. He was an MBBS doctor, but the amount of knowledge that he had and the amount of skills of clinical general examination, what Sir was talking about, that he possessed, probably in that time with no diagnostics available, was at another different level.
I've seen your dad I'm sorry to interrupt you. I've seen your dad while walking in Lodi Garden. People would stop him and say, ki, Doctor Saab bataiye. And this is what happens, right? I think doctors, whenever you people go out, even for dinners or whatever, free mein advice dena padta hoga. So, right, continue. Sorry for disturbing you.
No, I completely agree. So when my Dadaji, he was an MBBS, but the amount of skills that he possessed without any dependence on any radiology, pathology, etc. those days in the 1940s and 1950s. So obviously the skill levels were very high. But I also feel that post that 1986 Consumer Act that was passed, where anyone could literally go to the court and say that, okay, there's this medical provider and that they diagnosed this without any documentation. Post that, doctors have also started asking for a lot more tests to document that diagnosis and then have management based on that documentation. So that has also increased the diagnostics. But at the same time, I heard this terminology called hyposcalemia. So our generation doctors now are so dependent on just reports and diagnostics and technology-based platforms to actually advise the patient. Like Sir was saying, that they don't really give value to actually examining the patient and wo nubs pakad ke ek bari patient se history lekar. So that hyposcalemia has also happened. But again, the flip side is that I feel that's a very good thing as well, because you're not firing in the dark. You have your clinical skills, you have your clinical examination, but at the same time, you have the power of science to overcome everything else and then have pinpoint treatment based on the precise the diagnosis that you get.
Right, Dr. Dang. I agree with you. And I think, when we used to hear in the 80s that, in America, medical costs were so phenomenally high, and insurance that doctors needed to take. And that's why, doctors moved from private practice into hospitals, because, if there is a medical legal case, you're stuck. You don't have the insurance of that level to deal with it. So that time we used to think, chalo baapre, at least India mein to aise nahi hai. But Doctor, you were saying about your brother who's also a doctor and practicing abroad. And do you see that now in India too, that because of these medical legal cases and things like that, do you feel that your generation of doctors also now they have to practice from these big institutional or big players in the market who can protect you legally? Because, if there are cases against you, it's hard to fight it.
Frankly speaking, if you ask him personally, I'm blend of the old thoughts and the new investigative approach, right? So unless you classically manage your patient clinically, you should not get the test done. Especially in pediatric age group, we are very sensitive. They are like very innocent kids. Right? Whether it's a family anxiety or whether it's a doctor anxiety, am I missing something? You are subjecting a innocent person for a test, and next time he will be dead scared of the medical science. So you are actually imposing a scare that is going to stay, a trauma in a child who is very innocent. So it is double-edged sword. Like as Dr. Dang said, yesterday there was very busy clinic. As I told you, I take 10-15 minutes per patient. I don't in hurry whether it is going to take 8 p.m., 10 p.m. There were lot of fights, and 2 patients said that we are in hurry, we have to leave something. I told them that I cannot hurry up just because I want to see you early. Because problem is with me. I am going to miss the diagnosis, right? And it is a loss of the patient. It is never a loss of a doctor. I'll feel bad. So what I found, another thing I want to add, as I told you, when you go to some marriage party, people will come, Doctor साहब देखना ये घुटने में बेटा देखना घुटने में दर्द हो रहा है. You tend to give some advice. That advice is without examination, without putting your brain, and that is going to harm this patient. Why? This casual advice, you can say, यार मैंने मिस कर दी डायग्नोसिस उसमें, लेकिन उसका लाइफ लॉन्ग का हार्म हो गया.
जी.
Secondly, investigations की बात करते हैं. If you something like a full body checkup, now there is a trend कि I am going full body checkup. Labs have got their, some lab parameters.
Yeah.
So full body checkup, even God cannot check your whole body when He build you body. There will be some fallacies, there will be some deficiencies. These type of full body checkup gives you pseudo confidence कि मैं तो टेस्ट करवा के लाया हूँ, कल ही मैंने टेस्ट करवाए हैं, सारे नॉर्मल हैं. What happens? You got your full body checkup, just a biochemical. There are millions of chemicals. They are not just hundreds of chemicals this lab is going to check. There are millions of chemicals. So first of all, you should consult a doctor.
Okay.
Get him physical, get your exam, then you get your labs. So this is the problem. There has to be blend between the clinical and laboratory. Only then I feel that we'll have best of the science.
Doctor, we just talked about, I just touched upon it, which I want to come back to, was about these tests for diabetes, and I want to come to this thing about diabetes in children. I have seen many instances where parents said, "Bacche sunte nahi hai," whether it is obesity or whether it is diabetes. And then by the time the child hits 18, diabetes has already set in, right? Is it something that we need to do much more, maybe at school level testing, or what is it how do we stop this issue?
So we know that India is, there's a capital of diabetes, world capital of diabetes. And same I found that past 3 years, either because of lifestyle, either because of COVID antibodies, either because of too much eating and sitting, sedentary work, the diabetes on rise. And second disease is tuberculosis. It has again come. It is the massive rise in tuberculosis case. I'm talking about good families. I'm not talking about just
those exposed
families.
to chulas and all that, not just that. No.
So these are the two diseases which I have got, other than vitamin D deficiency, autoimmune disease, and blah blah. But I'm talking about these three diseases: vitamin D deficiency, psychological, diabetes, and tuberculosis. This is on rise. Reason could be what I told you and what Dr. Saab has elaborated in, and we not only need to test somehow. आप जो बात बोल रहे हो ना कि बच्चे सुनते नहीं हैं, पेरेंट्स भी नहीं सुनते, हम भी अपने फ़ोन पे देखते रहते हैं तो बच्चे भी देखते हैं, पेरेंट्स अपने फ़ोन पे पूरे दिन लगे हुए हैं, सो दे कॉपी यू, राइट? सो वी नीड टू चेक आवर सेल्फ ऑल्सो, एंड अनफॉर्चुनेटली मोस्ट ऑफ द होमवर्क इज़ ऑन व्हाट्सएप, सो दे गेट एक्सक्यूज़ कि आपको फ़ोन चाहिए. तो एक बार फ़ोन आ गया, व्हेन वी एडल्ट कैन गेट डिस्ट्रैक्टेड बिकॉज ऑफ फ़ोन. Think about kids who have got immature mind, right? So it gives you power, but it takes power of concentration also, the phone. That is a major problem. So what I feel that, of course, we should catch them as early, especially at 8-10 years old child, we should catch them. And lifestyle diseases, it is a totally preventable disease. Even if the family is full of diabetics, you can delay it. Right. You can delay it. And even if you are having diabetes, you can have best of the lifestyle. Look at the Wasim Akram. He's also diabetic. Look at how he plays, how fit he is, right?
Yes.
So over the years, probably awareness is very important among us. And India, why? Because all mothers are, pamper their kids like anything. So paratha
with
ho
food.
Gaya, meetha ho gaya, ye sari
as
cheezein.
Food as a substitute for everything
so
else.
Food is a religion. Food is you can say a way to pamper our guest.
Dr. Tang, I want to come to ask, to take it forward from where he was saying, you're a young doctor. Lifestyle diseases, as Dr. Saab was saying, is something that we are bringing it upon ourselves, whether as parents, whether as whatever, professionals, because we are hard pressed for time. Do you think, at least when I was in school, the medical room that you had was only for injuries.
Absolutely.
Nothing more than that. At least in my generation, there were the teachers were only interested ki syllabus khatam karo. There was nothing beyond that. Like the school didn't look for that whole well-being concept is not there. And my generation, I think the wrong things of eating, the wrong lifestyle started from our school and college days. Nobody told us कि चश्मे लग जाएंगे तो तुम NDA में नहीं जा सकते. You can't do, those kind of things were not there. What are you saying? Do you think that schools need to be more proactive when it comes to, a healthy lifestyle right from, preteen onwards? What do you think?
Absolutely. I feel that your younger days, whatever's imbibed in you, like you were saying, stays with you for the rest of your life. And in your curriculum to have something that talks about healthy habits, that talks about how to prevent diseases when you're older, how to actually spread that awareness also among your fellow beings and classmates, I think that's very important. But also I think we have technology again favoring the youngsters. Like I see you're wearing a wearable watch on your wrist that will actually measure your pulse, and that will measure your glucose, and that will measure your heartbeat and your various things. So I'll tell you.
Yes, it came to me only when after I had a very severe attack. Let me be honest with you. It came when I had a very severe attack of COVID with during the Delta wave, and it was then that I was told कि ये पहन लो कि you get to. I've never checked it, mind you.
So exactly. So I'll tell you a small story about an NBA player in the US, and I recently read it. And there was this person who was wearing an Apple Watch, and he was playing basketball, and he had an arrhythmia. Arrhythmia is something like an irregular heartbeat.
Yeah.
And he's one of the most fit athletes, but he still felt it. But his watch actually showed a notification that please see a cardiologist. So he went to the cardiologist. Just listen to this. The cardiologist diagnosed him with something that we call as hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. This is a disease that happens most commonly in athletes. Post that diagnosis, they did a genetic test for 3 of his brothers, out of which 2 also had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy.
They didn't know.
Yeah, so they took the preventive steps, the treatment, and now he's perfectly fine. So this is how something as small as an Apple Watch on our wrist or any of these watches that we have can give a notification that can ultimately actually save lives, multiple lives, mind you. So this is again something that the youngsters have inculcated. Obviously, like Doc Saab was saying, obviously there are more phones and WhatsApp, but then the silver lining to that dark cloud is that yes, from your younger days only, if you are more proactive about these different health conditions, I think it can go a long way.
Yeah, Dr. Saab, this is very important, I think, especially with younger children, those who are smart enough to understand, to know that something is happening to them. Like, I know of a friend whose son is a teenager, and at some point of time, he called up his mother, who's also a physician, mind you, and he called her up at the workplace and said that I think I need to be taken to the hospital. So she said, what happened? Saying, I haven't told you, but I have been taking this X drug for sleep, which I didn't tell you, but I have taken this and I think I have overdosed. Now, while we were talking earlier, Doctor, about, Googling and the negatives, but this child could figure out that what he has done is he could figure out that he has taken the wrong. So, he was taken and there was a stomach wash and everything was cleared. But sometimes technology can affect. Do you agree?
I think it has to be blend of both.
Both.
Right. And regarding technology, it has become so easy to get and so easy to be used by people. Like I do respiratory, I take care of respiratory diseases in pediatric patients and allergic diseases. What I have found that now everything is portable. If I want to do regarding this something known as adenoidal hypertrophy, that is tonsil, and that can lead to decrease in oxygen deficiency in the night, and parents won't come to know that your child is actually suffering from this disease. Now you've got pulse oximeter in every home.
Correct.
You just apply your pulse oximeter to a patient, to a child who is having some nasal problem, some snoring problem, or some sleep restlessness in the night, and you'll be able to diagnose, oh, my child is suffering from actually a major problem, which is not very much evident in the daytime. So I mean to say, this type of technologies are available, and this COVID has taught us that technology has got its own uses, and people and kids are very smart. Means I have got 2 kids. One is in IIT Roorkee. He's just entering. He's very smart. He knows that how to take care of his health and what type of diet I should be using, and more than the parents, if parents says कि ये खाओ ये नहीं खाओ, it won't affect them. But the social media, especially peer group pressure, that I've got good physique, what you have, so probably that has that takes them to different level, which we cannot imagine. So there is positive, there is negative, but the problem is of the immature mind of say 10-year, 8-year-old child. That is that is a population which is very immature.
Right. But
They
Doctor,
take negative out of the positives.
Doctor, sir, you're talking about young adults, your son, and that they are aware. But Dr. Dang, I would ask both of you, young adults suddenly getting these heart attacks and dying in a gym, dying at work. Everybody is saying that there seems to be something inexplicable. Is this like long COVID? What is happening? Why so many young people who show no signs of ailment suddenly just dropping dead?
So it is indeed tragic and shocking also, and there have been youngsters in the late 20s, early 30s, late 30s and so on who have had cardiovascular events. And I think it is something that can be attributed to both. One is that for 2 or 3 years, people were even scared to go out to the park for a brisk walk. So their exercise, their gym, their games, everything actually reduced drastically. So that would be one. And then obviously long COVID, especially the Delta wave, and post that when we got a lot of people that had prolonged symptoms for over 3 to 6 months, I think that has something to do with it. I have also been reading multiple studies that favor the long-term effects of COVID on heart health, and it can probably be because of both. That's what I feel.
Do you agree, Dr. Gupta? And what is the solution? Because as a parent, your son is in IIT, you say, so the pressures must be so much on him. In addition to his course that he's doing, there's also, like you said, peer pressure. Everybody wants to look good. It's the Instagram age, so everybody wants to be fit, look good. There is that pressure, and then you also, I'm sure, you have preteens who are your patients. So this whole thing, how much of vitamins are people pumping in, and all these supplements? This is a very dangerous trend. I mean, it's good in a way that they're aware that they need to be healthy, but this vitamin pumping, all this is how detrimental is it?
One terminology I use: overdoing. Overdoing is harmful, right? One should know, one should recognize their own body, own capabilities, strength and weaknesses, right? And something like, as a parents, you always feel that शक्ल मेरे बच्चों की मेरे पे जानी चाहिए, राइट? हाइट अमिताभ बच्चन पे जाए, और जो स्ट्रेंथ है दारा सिंह की जाए, और जो मेंटल नॉलेज है वो हर्षद भोगले पे जाए या ऐसे जाए, राइट? एंड सो फैमिली एंड पीडियाट्रिक बच्चों में भी ऐसे ही होता है. व्हेन दे लुक एट द सोशल मीडिया, उनको लगता है आई शुड लुक लाइक दिस. They should know they have got some strength and some weaknesses. If we overdo the things, right, then you'll end up in problems. So why it is happening? One, because of social media, everybody comes to know that 40-year man, 27-year-old man is a popular and he died because of exercise and gymming. Now, that is the undue pressure over that guy. He tried to match some other person, but he forgets his own capabilities, strength and weakness, right?
Yeah.
So that is the problem. So you try for 20-30 years, you were just a sedentary person. Suddenly, because of social pressure, you start looking, okay यार मेरे को ऐसा दिखना चाहिए. So आपके पास अब easily treadmill आ गई है. पहले ट्रेडमिल नहीं थी. पहले आप ग्राउंड में जाते थे, आप थक जाते थे, आपके पास कोई फिगर नहीं होती थी, आप बैठ जाते थे, राइट? अब क्या हो गया, आपको एक फिगर मैच करनी है. मैंने इतना कार्डियो करना है, इतना मिनट करना है, और मैंने ट्रेनर रखा हुआ है, इसको मैंने मैच करना है. सबकी वॉचेस कनेक्टेड हैं. अच्छा, आज आपने 22 किलोमीटर रन किया है, मैं आज 23 करके दिखाता हूँ. बट वी आर फॉरगेटिंग ही हैज़ गॉट डिफरेंट जेनेटिक मेकअप, आई हैव गॉट डिफरेंट जेनेटिक मेकअप.
राइट.
माई कैपेबिलिटी फॉर 30 years आई वॉज जस्ट ए सीडेंट्री वर्कर. ऑल ऑफ सडन मैं उठा, सोचता हूँ मैं मिल्खा सिंह बन जाऊँ. सो दिस इज गोइंग टू हैपन. सो मैं एक चीज़ बोलता हूँ, वो कौवा चले हंस की चाल. आई मीन टू से, जो आप हो अपने आप को पहचानो, एक लिमिट रखो. So that will help. So one should know their limits. So
Okay.
should not try to match some other person. And one last point I want to add, genetic is something that is poured in the medical science, and many diseases in many patients who have got some unknown death in the family, they should consult the genetist, and they will get you the idea. Okay, you can get sequencing, genomic sequencing or something, so that we can predict that you have also got some problem which can lead to sudden death, like QT syndrome, some problem in the ECG, some problem in the heart, which is not apparent, but can become apparent if you're exercising, if you're stressed in the stress. So probably we should consult a doctor if something has happened in your family, like a young person has died, and that will help you in future.
Dr. Dang, then who should one go to? Like if, as Dr. Gupta said, that you're feeling this that so and so has your cousin or your sibling or somebody has passed away due to a heart related issue. You need to go to your GP. How do you get to know that it's a genetic disorder or whatever?
So a genetic disorder essentially can either be lifestyle related, like Doc Saab was saying, CVD, that's a cardiovascular disease, or it can also be what is actually more known to science today is an oncology ailment that someone's had in the family. Especially if someone's had a breast cancer or there's a male who's had a colon cancer, then obviously your oncologist will guide you. In a lifestyle disease, your physician will guide you to go to a suitable person, a person who can tell you exactly about the diagnosis earlier and what test is required for you. Also, there is precision medicine now that is very interesting. And as per the makeup of your genes, the medication that you are being given will be suitable to that. Like what Dr. Gupta was saying, now even for diseases like obviously for cancer, etc., it is very personalized, the treatment, depending on the signature of the cancer and your genes. But also apart from that, you have even medication for diabetes, even other autoimmune disorders, where it's actually tailor-made so that it suits you well. So this realm of science is called pharmacogenomics.
Okay.
So again, this is this huge area that is being, we are waiting to leverage it so that we can get the maximum benefits from it.
Doctor, your hospital where you work, there are thousands of people who come every week, and you literally dozens of patients that you need to see. But in spite of telemedicine, in spite of us having so many hospitals and all, we still have a shortage of doctors in this country. We still have patients who have to come in from villages, camp in cities. And, one had thought that things will change, but it's still there. It's still that primary healthcare facilities are there in our villages. But when it comes to, having these complicated tests, as you were mentioning, Dr. Dang, we still need to come to cities, the major metros.
Actually, the problem is with the primary health. What is happening? We don't have good infrastructure in the villages. Like many of my colleagues, I'm 53, so many of my friends now have settled in Australia villages. They opt to settle in the village. You ask your child, you ask your growing child who is in medical science, tell them that go and serve in the village. Nobody will agree.
Yeah.
Right? There is some problem. What is the problem? We don't have good infrastructure in the village. Nobody wants to go there. Now, unless we have got very strengthened primary care, we'll require tertiary cares like our hospital. Actually, if you look at Sri Lanka, now they are in problem due to different reasons, but they have got very good primary care. At primary level, if you are able to tackle the situation, preventive medicine is always better than a cure, better than the cure. You cannot cure most of the disease. Like even if you are having genetic disease, if you have got genetic predisposition for cardiovascular disease, but if your lifestyle is perfect, right from the infancy, then probably despite of predisposition, you may not have symptomatology later on, right? So preventive medication is unfortunately lacking in India at all, except few vaccination.
Right.
So we need to have good infrastructure at the village level, And good infrastructure, not medical infrastructure. I'm talking about in general infrastructure where a person can live suitable life.
Dr. Dang, corporates are entering into, into the whole hospital scene and into the diagnostic scene. Does that mean that this problem which Dr. Gupta was talking about, where, in villages we don't have primary healthcare center, do you think that once corporates come in and they're given incentives to set up these primary healthcare centers and diagnostic centers, do you think things will improve with that?
Absolutely. I think more than this being a destination about strengthening primary healthcare, it's for our country, it's going to be a journey. And I think a very vital step in that journey is going to be the larger players like these corporate hospital chains actually penetrating this tier 2, tier 3 cities and smaller areas where there is a dearth of these primary healthcare facilities. Now, also what's very important, apart from setting up a brick and mortar kind of a structure where there's a suitable doctor and a healthcare staff, is also awareness initiatives. Now, also in rural areas and villages, that are simple things like pap smears for cervical cancer for ladies and other simple tests like a PSA test for an elderly male, like what Dr. Gupta was saying, that prevention, so that at least instead of this entire system or ecosystem where it's all about sick care, we actually flip it and make it more about preventive care or well care, like we call it, so that we have minimum people who are actually falling sick. So yes, awareness, education like what you were talking about, and also penetration into these rural areas by these bigger corporate chains who can provide that brick and mortar and a doctor, I think are all a part of the picture.
Okay. Dr. Gupta, I want to ask you about this. What is tomato flu? There was this whole panic situation. One is the tomato flu and the other one was monkeypox. Has it come in? Is it coming? Was it right, the panic that was setting in?
Actually, media and people are more aware if some negative news gets in or some catchy name like tomato, like monkey, right? So लोगों को लगता है यार ये कुछ नया आ गया, न्यूज़पेपर को पढ़ने लगते हैं. सो मंकी में एक्चुअली में मंकी पॉक्स कुछ भी नहीं था, राइट? वो मंकी से स्टार्ट हुआ था, 15 मंकीज़ में स्प्रेड हो गया था कहीं कोपेनहेगन में, तो वहाँ से मंकी आ गया नाम. उसके बाद लोगों को लगा कि अब तो कोविड से बोर हो गए हैं यार, कुछ और नया नाम डालते हैं, तो किसी ने लैंसेट में भेज दिया टोमेटो फ्लू, राइट? टोमेटो फ्लू कुछ नहीं था. केरला में हैंड फुट माउथ डिजीज़ आई थी और हैंड फुट माउथ डिजीज़ को इनिशियली उन्होंने 30-40 पेशेंट्स में देखा, अजीब से रैश आए थे, बटक्स पे टोमेटो जैसा रेडनेस थी और उनका था. तो उन्होंने एक टर्म कॉइन किया, उस टर्म कॉइन करके एक आर्टिकल दे दिया, एक कॉरस्पॉन्डेंस करके उन्होंने वहाँ कर दिया. तो वो कॉरस्पॉन्डेंस जो प्रिंट हुआ वो काफ़ी टाइम बाद हुआ, क्योंकि नॉर्मली इनमें टाइम लगता है, 2-3 मंथ्स के बाद हुआ. तो वो जब तक हैंड फुट माउथ डिजीज़ पूरे देश में आ गई थी तब वहाँ से आया ये टोमेटो फ्लू, राइट? तो लोगों को लगा ये अब नई चीज़ आ गई, पहले कोविड था, फिर मंकी पॉक्स आया, अब ये हैंड फुट माउथ डिजीज़ आ गई, अब ये टोमेटो फ्लू आ गया. इंडिया में या कहीं भी लोगों को वाओ फैक्टर एक लगता है और ओह फैक्टर, ये क्या हो गया, ओह एंड वाओ में बड़ा अच्छा लगता है सुन के, ये ना लोग आपकी बात सुनते हैं, राइट? सो एक यही फैक्टर है. अदरवाइज टोमेटो फ्लू इज़ नथिंग हैंड फुट माउथ डिजीज़. अब हमें मालूम है हैंड फुट माउथ डिजीज़ नॉर्मली बेनाइंग डिजीज़ है, लेस देन 7 ईयर में होती है, स्प्रेड करती है, स्कूल बंद कर दिए कोई ज़रूरत नहीं होती, लेट द वायरस स्प्रेड, लाइफ थ्रेटनिंग ही है तो क्या प्रॉब्लम है, राइट? जैसे कोविड है, कोविड भी तो स्प्रेड हो रहा है, ऐसा थोड़ी है कोविड कहीं चला गया है. लाइफ थ्रेटनिंग नहीं है तो वायरस भी तो रहेगा ही. वायरस कहाँ जाएगा बेचारा, राइट?
Dr. Dang, we've spoken so much about patients, about children, everybody. Now I have to ask you about the healthcare of doctors. You read in the paper sometimes that doctors are under severe pressure and some have even committed suicide, because... Now tell me, what is it about, doctors falling ill like this, having mental pressure that they can't cope? Can't doctors see it's a very basic question that a doctor should be able to tell, that he's or she is slipping into some kind of a depressive state and needs help. Do doctors hesitate in seeking help or hesitate in accepting that there might be something wrong?
So, very pertinent question, and I'm glad we are getting a chance to discuss this. But I'll divide it into two parts. One is through your MBBS and your MD and residency days. Now, obviously, during this time, especially your MBBS and your MD, the curriculum is so robust and so stressful along with the classes that you have to attend. I think that pressure of the exams, like you have your board exams, etc., this is probably multifold, and there's so much at stake, especially like again what Dr. Gupta was saying about that peer pressure, that everyone wants to do well. So I think it is more of actually inculcating that mental health chapter in all MBBS and medical students, so that they can actually understand what is mental health, and also have that service, that if someone wants to reach out to someone, they should have that accessibility so that they can get counseling, they can get therapy, and so on and so forth. And I really feel that is lacking in the current Indian medical institutes that we have.
You must have done your PG after
Yes.
several years after Dr. Gupta
That's
is
right.
done. Did you have that kind of in your medical college? Was there anybody reaching out?
No.
Nothing?
We had our fixed academicians, our teachers, professors, batchmates, etc. But I don't call anything being so accessible like the way I feel that it should be with all these strategies, these tragedies that we are hearing. Also, now coming to the flip side, now even with practicing doctors, I think one thing that the nation needs to understand is that we are not superhumans. And it is not possible that you called us at 10:45, and if we didn't pick up, then it doesn't mean we don't care about you. It just means we might be sleeping, or it means that we might be in the middle of dinner or something important. So I think it's also that expectation that where, especially in a country like India, like abroad, I have a lot of friends in the US and the UK, and post 5 p.m. they are off for work. But here, I think it's also the immense amount of passion that we work with, that even if it's 8:30 and if you're sitting with your own family and someone calls you, your family also wants you to pick up, because a 1 minute call that you have with them, it's probably going to put them at ease and help them out the entire night or maybe a day. So I think that empathy and that passion together is what fuels our fire, but I think that will eventually take a toll on it.
Yeah.
And I think accessibility to the right therapist or somewhere where you can be heard, I think is critical again. And obviously a very important work-life balance is something also that all doctors should maintain, having hobbies or playing a sport. I know, easier said than done,
Yeah.
but that is the need of the hour.
Dr. Gupta, I'm sure there is no work-life balance that you have. You, as a pediatrician, I'm sure you need to be available, or you are available to your patients.
I will say that I'll spoiled my whole life if I try to follow, and I didn't follow even 1% of that, and I paid for that, right? And all life, not lifestyle, lot of problems. But what I would like to say, like right from the MBBS, and first of all, I totally agree with him. And just I want to add extra that 60% of curriculum should be removed from medical science. Like for a MBBS doctor, why I need to find out what is happening in the cell under the microscope when I am not going to chase histopathology as my curriculum, right? So these type of unnecessary burden over a brain is a brain, right? It has got limitation. We should try not to over test it. So in India already we are overpopulated. So for one seat there are 25,000 candidates.
Yes.
Over and above, you're giving unnecessarily, which are not going to unnecessary curriculum. It's 60% if it's just rubbish. 30% is carrying history. Just you want to carry the legacy, but doesn't burden the things by giving the medical history as a 30% of the curriculum. Secondly, there are something super specialists need to know. Why you are telling the MBBS person to cram up the things which doesn't have practical implication for at least next 10 years for him. So my feeling is that many of the things, because my other son is doing MBBS. He is in final year. He's
reduce
a
the
very
workload.
mature guy. He's, I found that he's much more maturer when I was, if I compare myself
When you
with
were studying.
Yeah, when I was in final year. But almost 60% is the curriculum should be removed immediately.
Right.
The professor should now come in the public domain and should try to reduce the burden of the whole society, medical society.
Dr. Dang, you were saying about how, in America or in the UK or in any of these Western countries, patients don't call up the doctors in the middle of the night and all. I'm sure both of you get calls. And I mean, we are all guilty of doing it. I wouldn't say just, the random people are, even I'm guilty that I could have waited till next morning to call up my doctor, but I need to know now. And especially I think, Dr. Saab, I will say to you, because जब बच्चा बीमार पड़ता है तो mother won't wait अगले दिन के लिए, उसी वक्त डॉक्टर को फ़ोन करेंगे. And pediatricians in India at least are always available 24 hours. I'll ask you, Dr. Saab, and then I'll come to you, Dr. Dang.
Yeah. इसके दो एस्पेक्ट्स हैं. पहला एस्पेक्ट, आई शुड नो कि व्हेन आई शुड सीक ए डॉक्टर इन ए क्लिनिक. Second, when I should seek a medical facility. So, in an emergency, suppose आपने बात की कि pediatricians 24 hours 365 days आपके कॉल पे रहते हैं. I totally agree, because पैनिक होता है बच्चों को लेके, पैनिक होता है. एडल्ट अपने लिए एब्जॉर्ब कर लेता है, बेचारा बच्चे को देखते हुए लगता है उसको पैनिक कर सकता है. इसमें आपको आइडिया होना चाहिए कि अगर ये लाइफ थ्रेटनिंग कॉम्प्लिकेशन की तरफ जा रहा है या मेजर क्राइसिस की तरफ जा रहा है, यू नीड मेडिकल फैसिलिटी, बट यू शुड गो टू ए हॉस्पिटल एंड एमरजेंसी में आप दिखाएं, रेदर देन कॉल करें फ़ोन पे. आप मेरे को अगर कॉल भी करते हैं रात को मिड ऑफ नाइट में, मैं कुछ ऐसी चीज़ बता दूंगा, हो सकता है आपका टाइम टल जाए लेकिन कॉम्प्लिकेशन ज़्यादा कॉम्प्लिकेट हो जाए और आप मिस कर दो बस को, राइट. जिस प्रॉब्लम ने आपको रात को 3 बजे उठा दिया है, इसका मतलब आपको हॉस्पिटल जाना चाहिए. यहाँ पे मैंने कई बार देखा कि सर आपका हाथ लगता है, आप मेरा बच्चा बिल्कुल ठीक हो जाता है. तो हम सुबह से आपके क्लिनिक का वेट कर रहे थे और कई बार मेरे क्लिनिक में बाहर बेचारा 2 घंटे बाद नंबर आया और मैं उसकी कंडीशन देखता हूँ तो मेरे को फील सॉरी होता है कि मेरी असिस्टेंट ने उसको पहले क्यों नहीं भेज दिया. 2 आवर्स भी सफिशिएंट होते हैं. सो आई मीन टू से दोज डिजीजेज विच डजंट गिव यू टाइम, गोल्डन आवर में उनको डॉक्टर के पास जाने की जगह कि हेल्थ केयर सिस्टम में जाना चाहिए. क्योंकि हेल्थ केयर सिस्टम अच्छा नहीं है हमारे पास. प्राइवेट है 80%, 20% गवर्नमेंट का. गवर्नमेंट में भीड़ लगी हुई है, लाइन लगी हुई है, कोई ठीक से पूछता नहीं है. पूछेगा कहाँ से? 40 पेशेंट है, कहीं ना कहीं तो मिस करेगा ही डॉक्टर. तो वो अब उनका ट्रस्ट खत्म हो जाता है कि सर वो तो देखता ही नहीं है ठीक से. अब इतनी लंबी लाइन लगी हुई है. अगर आप यूके में देखें, आपको अगर NHS में 44 आवर्स वेटिंग टाइम था.
करेक्ट.
हमारे यहाँ आपको अगर 44 आवर वेटिंग टाइम का होगा तो आप फ़ोन करने लगोगे, या तो किसी मिनिस्टर का फ़ोन आ जाएगा, किसी हॉस्पिटल में किसी बड़े उसका फ़ोन आ जाएगा, यार जाके देख यार वो बेचारी 1 घंटे से वेट कर रही है. हमारे यहाँ जिसके पास मनी है वो 1 मिनट नहीं वेट करना चाहता. जिसके पास बेचारे के पास रिसोर्स नहीं है वो डिजीज सीवियरिटी होते हुए भी 1 दिन तक वेट कर रहा होता है, राइट. ये डिस्पैरिटी जब तक नहीं ठीक होगी तो तब तक हमारा काम आगे नहीं बढ़ेगा. हमें इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे केयर देनी पड़ेगी, राइट. जैसे मेरे को अगर टेस्ट करवाने हैं, मेरे पास कोई सिस्टम नहीं है कि मैं इस सिस्टम में जाऊंगा मेरा टेस्ट हो जाएगा. मैं डॉक्टर डैंग को इंडिविजुअली फ़ोन करूंगा कि यार डॉक्टर डैंग सर मेरा करा दो प्लीज़ काम.
एग्जैक्टली.
जब तक वो मेरे की जगह हमारा नहीं होगा तब तक इंडिविजुअलिटी और इंडिविजुअल फ़ोन नंबर्स की इम्पोर्टेंस रहेगी. हम कितनी भी बात कर लें, बड़ी बड़ी बात करेंगे, वो अगर अल्टीमेटली हमें जब काम करवाना है तो हुक एंड क्रुक से हम काम कराएंगे. और जो इंडिविजुअल नंबर हुक एंड क्रुक का ही एक पार्ट है.
You're so right. Absolutely right. Dr. Dang, in fact, what Dr. Gupta is saying, it struck home when COVID happened. And, our cousins and all that who were living abroad, and they said 48 hours mein testing nahi hogi. And even till recently, when they were, people were traveling there and they needed that, that air suvidha ke liye you need that test or whatever pehle hota tha, travel test, 48 hours, and then drive several hours away, get that COVID negative, and then suppose your flight got delayed, फिर आप अटक गए. And I was like, boasting so much कि अरे हमारे यहाँ तो कोई problem नहीं है, कहीं पे भी करा लो, like you just need to go. Didn't you feel at that time a sense of pride that at least we had those facilities at that stage?
No, I think I completely agree with you. I think the healthcare ecosystem in India should be praised more, especially when you look at the availability and affordability and also the accessibility to a doctor, I would say.
Yeah.
Obviously, rural areas, and I'm not talking about tier 3, 4, but at least the major
those
cities.
are endemic problems,
now,
but yeah.
Absolutely. But now if you compare, say, a big city like a London, for example, to a Delhi or a Bombay, you will see a striking difference.
Yeah.
Now, the cost of the same test there is about 10 to 15 times of a simple blood test. The same blood test that you'll do in Delhi versus what you'll do there, I can vouch that if you get it done from a good lab in Delhi, I would say that is more reliable.
Yeah, agree. Agree. Totally.
But what about in, like,
Yes.
if you were to just tell me in, say, dollar terms, because we've got viewers, listeners who live abroad. Like in dollar terms, one test here and one test in, say, the US.
Okay, so this was basically a few months back, and I had a friend who went and got a COVID antibody test done there, and they wanted a Pfizer vaccine. So there, I think it cost them some $800 for the same test that happens here for 1,000 rupees, 1,500 rupees. So yeah, exactly. So you're do
You
the
can't
math.
even compare this, right?
Exactly. So yeah, but there's also a point that almost all testing there is insurance driven, and here it's out of pocket.
So is this going to happen here too? Do you see? Because I am seeing, like we were talking about this whole thing about, you have to get tests done these days, and then there is the whole malpractice thing. Do you think it's going to happen here too, where tests could become so phenomenally expensive, or because of corporates coming in, will it become cheaper? What is going to happen?
I think that's a mystery that we have to wait and watch. But
Okay.
I do feel that with this entire industry having that picture of lucrativeness, because of which you have your pharma players, you have your corporate hospitals, you have a lot of these e-commerce players now entering diagnostics. I think eventually in a few months or a year or two, the bubble's going to burst. Now, what the masses also need to understand, that the same test, now everyone experienced that with the RT-PCR. You have the same little card kit that you use at home, that's the antigen test, that is not at all as reliable as the gold standard, that's the RT-PCR, and that's a fraction of cost of the RT-PCR. But in the end, the report will say COVID negative and positive. So the same test can be done in dozens of different ways at different quality benchmarks. So obviously that is something that the end consumer or the patient will also eventually understand.
Doctor, just before we conclude, I have to ask you, Dr. Saab, अब अगर हम सोचे कि हम winter आ रही है, do we have to give kids flu shots? Do we have to give elders flu shots? And because the symptoms, of flu and COVID are so similar.
Yeah.
So flu shot लेना चाहिए?
Yes, sir. Yes. बिल्कुल लेना चाहिए flu, and it is a preventable disease, and especially high risk cases में लेना चाहिए. और indirectly कहीं ना कहीं ये COVID या बाकी आपकी innate immunity भी better करता है. It improves your innate immunity, and it will help. I would last comment on what he said. There are two things, quality and quantity. India is just Indians and India economy is based on quantity, not quality. Unfortunately, what is going to happen, like you get a CT scan for the chest, it carries huge radiation. It should be of the best of the center with the best of the quality. But if you get that CT scan of very low quality, though it cost even if cost doesn't matter, but instead of ruling out the disease, quality is so bad that you cannot get another CT scan, and the patient will end up in major problem because you were dealing with a poor quality investigation, and the purpose of that investigation was not served. So again, what is said, that too many investigations given as a package just to lure the patient, rather than focusing on high quality limited test,
Right.
is going to backfire very soon.
Okay.
And it is backfiring many of the patient. क्योंकि आपको कॉन्फिडेंस होता है मैंने ये टेस्ट करा लिया, अब ये तो डिजीज है ही नहीं, जबकि क्वालिटी इतनी पुअर थी वो रूल आउट ही नहीं कर सकता था, और आप नेक्स्ट टेस्ट कर नहीं सकते हो. So ये
Go
चीज
to
हमें
a general practice. Go to a physician who will tell you कि कौन से टेस्ट कराने
वो
हैं.
टेस्ट की क्वालिटी क्या है, उसको वाकई रूल आउट कर सकती है कि नहीं है. आई थिंक ये फिजिशियन डिसाइड करेगा.
जी जी.
रेदर देन गेटिंग पावर्ड एम्पावर्ड ए सूडो एम्पावरिंग कि भाई ये सर मैं तो जाके ये लैब में गया था, वहाँ पे एक हेल्थ केयर सेंटर बना हुआ था, उन्होंने 300 टेस्ट कर दिए मेरे 3,000 रुपये में. उसको क्या मालूम वो 3,000, वो तो एक तीर आप चला रहे हो ना, आप मल्टीपल डायरेक्शन में जा रहे हो. तो हम जो अर्जुन की आंख थी, आंख को छोड़ के हम सबको मार गए.
Okay. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Dr. Gupta, Dr. Dang. And we're going to get you back as soon as possible for this whole set of questions that I have for you regarding what we need to do, during the winters, when we are heading towards this period. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having.
Thank you for listening in to ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Like or subscribe in whichever platform you listen to this in. Namaste. Jai Hind.